Sat Sri Akal, welcome to I'm a Brown Girl. My name's Amma. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about dating within the Desi community. I think when it comes to dating as a Desi person, of course you have the super supportive families that do encourage their children to go out and date for themselves as you should and learn about themselves to figure out what they like, what they don't like. And they have that healthy and supportive environment at home where the kids can come back and be like, hey, mom, dad, I'm dating this person, or I went on a date with this person, and have that full support from the home. But with my experience, it wasn't like that. When it came to dating for me, it was very much you cannot date anyone until you're married. When you get married, you can do whatever you want. The concept of dating did not exist, and there was a lot of fear pushed behind it. Today's episode, what I want to talk about is my experience of dating when I was younger and the social and family pressures that I had around it in terms of not dating at all. And if by any chance a chat shit auntie caught me with a boy, my life would be over, and that would instantly mean I need to get married and I can't be let out of the house and I'd be in trouble. So there was a lot of pressure growing up when it came to dating. I also want to talk about how important it is for parents to allow their teenagers and young adults to make informed choices for themselves when it comes to dating. Dating is not meant to be a scary thing. It's meant to be something very enjoyable where you get to meet lots of wonderful people. And I think it's helpful when you have parents to have support from. And the third thing I want to talk about is the amount of progression and depth there is to relationships in our culture and the change in societal pressures that there's been over time. So to start with my dating experience as a teenager and young adult, I was not allowed to date at all. And anyone who I did date was a massive secret. Like the thought of telling my parents that, hey, mum or dad, I've got a boyfriend, was asking for a one-way ticket to hell, not heaven, because obviously it's sinful. You can't date, you can't have a boyfriend. In my parents' brain, they thought that dating equals sex. There's no other way I can put it, and that is as blunt as it gets. But my parents literally thought that dating means, oh my God, that means Aman's having sex, which is really funny to think about it, especially when I say it out loud, because it shows the lack of education or understanding my parents had when it came to relationships. They were not so informed about sex and relationships before they got married. It was only once they got married that they were like, oh, we need to have babies and we need to maintain a healthy relationship. So their understanding of sex and relationships, especially for their children being me, wasn't the strongest. And it makes so much sense why they thought the way that they did. From the ages of 16 to 21, I had my first proper boyfriend. I had like small high school flings and a boyfriend for a month here and there. Like it wasn't anything crazy, but like I had my first serious relationship quite young. And they didn't know about it until maybe 4 years in. I was with that person for 5 years. And this wasn't because I didn't want to tell them. I couldn't tell them for my safety. I knew that if I told them, my life would be over because I had grown up with this, you can't date, you can't have a boyfriend, you have to get married at 25 and that is it. But there comes a point in your life where if you've ever felt like you cannot tell something important to your parents, especially if it's something like a relationship and, you are serious with that person, when you can't tell your parents, there's this pressure that builds up inside you where there's only so long you can keep it because you're going to have to tell them at some point. And don't get me wrong, my parents weren't stupid. Like they knew that something was going on. Like they could clearly see I was going out at odd times. I was dressing up. I was wearing a lot more makeup. I was acting weird and my hormones were everywhere. So they weren't completely oblivious to the fact that I could have been dating someone, but they were very, like, it's not like my parents didn't know. I just think they chose to not believe it or see it despite the signs. They even had chat shit aunties and uncles come to them and say that, I think your daughter's dating someone. And they would just be like, okay. And I think they were quite good with that. It was a bit like until I came to them and didn't confirm it, they weren't willing to believe it. So they were in denial is basically what I'm saying. That took me so long to explain. I was trying to figure that out myself. But yes, they were in denial. The thing with a lot of secret relationships, especially in Desi culture, is when you go through things like a heartbreak, you go through that shit alone. And it really sucks because you'll be in your room crying your eyes out and your mom will come and be like, what's wrong with you? And you can't say anything because you can't just say, hi, mom, I'm heartbroken. My boyfriend just dumped me, because your mom is going to be angry at the fact that, oh my God, you had a boyfriend. She wouldn't even comprehend the fact that I'm heartbroken. She would only see red and be angry that I had a boyfriend in the first place, because that means, oh my God, she was having sex. That is literally how the thought process would have worked. At this point, we know that if you do listen to my podcast, the pressures of marriage is insane, especially on Desi women and Desi men at some point, I think at a later age. But I don't know, it just feels like I genuinely thought I'd be married by 25, pushing 27. Like I was like, yeah, 25, married, 2-3 kids, and that would be me. But no, I'm 25, unmarried, a lesbian, no kids, and thriving. So really did a 360, and I wasn't expecting it. If 21-year-old Amma knew this to be me now, I'd self-combust. I'd explode. Moving on to my second point in terms of just parents and how important it is for you guys to help your children or young adults, teenagers, whatever. If your kids are dating, you need to be there for them. You need to support them and not make them feel like dating is this big, scary, bad world of just horrible people, because there are good people in the world. And it's your job to help your kids navigate good boundaries, how to, find good people and what to look out for. I think when it comes to dating, number one thing I would say is kindness. Whoever your kid decides to be with, or even if you're dating yourself, the first thing you need to ask yourself is the person you're dating a kind person? Are they genuinely kind? Are they considerate? And I think something as small as that would have been very helpful for me, because my ex was not kind. He was horrible. And my parents never gave me that talk. And I don't blame them, to be clear, but they didn't have the skills or the education or the parenting to know that that conversation is very needed. I feel like if you're a parent watching my episode right now and you're thinking, damn, maybe I should talk to my kid, just be glad I'm not asking you to have the sex talk, because the sex talk is also really important. And I just feel like if I had a safe adult when I was younger to guide me or have those important chats, I would have avoided a lot of silly mistakes. I think it's so important for parents to have those conversations with their children about dating, sex and relationships, boundaries, what to look out for, that they know that you guys are always there to support. The thing I found with dating back in the day was I found that a lot of people lacked depth or truly wanted to challenge their reality in terms of, questioning themselves as to, do I actually want to get married? What kind of relationship style do I want? Or ever exploring anything beyond date, get married, have kids. Through actually pushing myself to think outside of the box and be uncomfortable, to learn about boundaries, journal, heal, question my relationship style, go through heartbreak, fall in love, actually think outside the box has been challenging at times, but made me realize that I don't want to end up with a dense brown boy who drives a Mercedes and makes it his entire personality. And my parents will probably love him because, oh my God, he's going to be a brown boy and we look great together. But at the end of the day, if this man couldn't even understand a meaningful conversation, what is the point? There were times in my dating life where I would ask a man a really deep question that was super introspective, and they would instantly fall in love with me because they're just like, wow, I've never had anyone ask me such a deep question. This girl must be so educated. Like, no, aside from the education, I actually question myself and think outside the box, and I want you to do the same. And you can't even do that. I was on a date once years ago, and I turned around to this guy. He was in a sports car. It was like, I can't remember, it was like a BMW, red interior. It was like super limited edition. And I turned around to him, I was like, apart from your money and your cars, what do you have? Like, what's your favorite thing about yourself? And he couldn't answer it. Like, the man was too stunned to speak. So the point I'm trying to say is, as parents, if you actually allow your kids to venture out and date and figure out what they like, what they don't like, understand boundaries, fall in love, experience heartbreak, it allows them to make better informed choices for themselves. I think these days, aside from relationships, I think the dating scene is not great. I was talking to my best friend and she just was saying how, she's this amazing person and she's got a lot going on for herself. But the men that are out there are just not great. And this wasn't only her, but a couple of my single friends, just the dating scene seems like people have really lost the art of conversation or wanting to get to know people for truly who they are. It's very superficial and surface level. I was watching this podcast maybe a week ago. I can't remember the name of it, but this woman was saying how this idea of constantly finding the one is very exhausting. Like, of course, it's okay to want to have someone to fall in love and have your person, but it's like when you go to a party with the mindset of, oh, maybe tonight I'm going to find the one, it creates a lot of pressure and it doesn't really allow you to ease up and be yourself. But if you went into that party not giving a shit about what anyone thinks and just being yourself, you're more likely to attract something that's more authentic because you were yourself and you didn't go out looking. And perhaps that's easier said than done because the idea of being lonely is bullshit. Easier said than done again. But I don't know. There's nothing more beautiful than being authentic. One thing that isn't spoken about enough, which is still a dating style, especially in the Desi culture, is involving your parents in your dating life, which personally to me doesn't appeal, never will, never has, couldn't think of anything worse. But it still does happen. It's a bit like an arranged date where, say, if my parents like a guy, they might introduce me to him so that we can date and all the family kind of know and the parents are heavily involved. But there's that kind of pressure or expectation that, okay, these guys are going to get married. Not always, but the point I'm trying to say that parents still being heavily involved in their kids' dating life to the point it's unhealthy is still very common in Desi culture. Not generalizing here to be clear, but it does still happen. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think there's just a fine line of what is healthy and what isn't. I think it's important to tell your parents, that, oh, mom, dad, this is who I'm dating. I like this person. But not to the point where your mum is so heavily involved because that's weird. Hence why so many mummy boys are bred. Having your families involved in your dating life can be very important at times because I can understand that, you want your family to accept whoever you're dating from a brown standpoint, but it can also be a massive burden. It's only now that I think that I'd be comfortable to tell my mum about my dating life or, if I was making a very drastic life decision that, I would want her to be involved and I could trust that she would be very supportive. But that's taken years and years of healing and support and growth. So it's not come without its challenges. But I must say that over the years, I've definitely seen a progressive change towards relationships and sex in the Desi community. I find that there's more of an open approach, more forward thinking. There's different styles of relationships. There's queer relationships. And dating in itself used to be seen as like a Western thing, but a lot of Desis are realizing it's not, that it's actually really weird to get married to your cousin or just get married at 25 and have no depth to your life. So it is important to step out of your comfort zone and figure out what you do and don't like. And I feel that's also started to be represented within TV and film over the last maybe 5 to 10 years. I recently watched a Netflix show called CA Topper, which was about a family man who had lost his bank account. So he couldn't access his money. So he needed money for his family. There was a lot of pressure, kids, wife, whatever. So he resorted to escorting, and this concept of male escorting wasn't something that was socially acceptable, but he pursued it and was really good at it. And, he didn't tell his wife, which obviously is cheating. But throughout that show, it really displayed lots of different relationship styles, because sometimes he would have a couple come in and the guy would just be watching, or it was a couple who wanted to have a threesome, or, there was married women who weren't receiving the love from the home. And affairs are very common, in my opinion. But it was interesting to see how those very complex relationship styles and the hardships and the highs and the lows that you go through when it comes to relationships were actually showcased in Indian TV and film. Firstly, to start with, to actually watch an Indian actor have sex on Netflix was mind-blowing, because if you've ever watched an old school Bollywood film, sex was not sex. It was just these two people rolling in a field and that was sex. But to actually watch sex being acted in this day and age is revolutionary for Indian society and Indian film and TV. And watching it made me realize that, wow, these complex ideas and the emotions that you go through when it comes to relationships are things that as humans we all feel. It doesn't actually matter what culture you're from. It's something that as humans we all go through. Even my mum watched it, which blew my mind. And she was able to relate to the show at points, So it kind of made me realize that, no, I'm not crazy for thinking like this, that I'm not just the 1% of an Indian woman who thinks outside the box, that many Indians think like this. And this is not just an Indian thing, this is a human thing, that everyone experiences those emotions and those complex emotions of relationships. You should constantly be questioning yourself as to, are you being authentic? Have you pushed yourself? Have you questioned your reality about relationships? Are you in a relationship that is serving you? Is this what you see for the rest of your life? Are you just going to settle and get married because you cannot fathom being alone? Overall, the point I'm trying to make is dating as an Indian woman who now is queer hasn't been the easiest. It took a lot for me to break free and actually say no, that I don't want to be another number who decided not to question themselves and question their reality, that I always felt like I had more living to do. I couldn't imagine anything worse than just settling. I had to kiss a lot of frogs. I went on a lot of weird dates, a lot of story times. I experienced heartbreak. I fell in love. I had to learn to respect my boundaries and heal. And that all happened without the pressure of dating from a Desi point of view. I really had to block the pressure, especially from my parents and society, because if I allowed myself to feed into that, I'd be married to a brown man with a kid and have a very dense relationship. Oh, just the thought of it, I couldn't. And despite me not having my parents to guide me through my dating life, especially in my younger years, it was fine because I did kiss a few frogs and it's okay because I learned something. But it took me actually challenging myself and pushing myself enough to be like, I'm going to date whoever the hell I want without anyone telling me who I can and can't date. I don't care what culture they come from. I don't care what religion they are. I'm going to date people based on what I like, based on what I want to learn about myself, and no one can stop me. You will find that a lot of people in our community will struggle to do that because there is this pressure to find one person, get married, have a kid, and settle down. And I'm here to tell you that you don't need to do that. You don't need to settle. You can fall in love with whoever you want and be true to yourself, especially when it comes to your love life. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I hope you learned something about my dating life and how insane it was. The lengths I went through to hide my ex-boyfriend were insane. The only way to describe it was insanity. The lies, the betrayal, the lengths I went to was insanity. I was so cunning. I was just so good at lying to get out of being in trouble. Honestly, I'm impressed at times, but wow, the lengths I went through to hide this man were a joke. No one should ever have to go through that. For any parents who are listening, I hope that you now know it's important to have conversations with your kids about dating, to encourage them to find out more about themselves, to make more informed decisions for themselves without thinking that dating is meant to be this horrible and feared thing, because it isn't. And lastly, that I love how Indian film and TV is becoming increasingly progressive, which shows that more people are thinking in a very open and progressive way. And if it's showcased more, a lot of people are going to feel heard, understood, less alone. And I love that. In terms of an end of episode check-in, I'm doing good, but I'm not okay, if that makes any sense. Because I'm going through something in my personal life, which is really hard, but I realized no matter how bad it gets, this podcast, which is my creative outlet, keeps me going. So for anyone who is having a hard time, please find something creative. Please find something that you love and hold on to it. Even though I post once every 2 weeks in terms of a new episode, I know that I have a responsibility. I know I have something to create, something that I'm passionate about. And it really does keep me going, despite my life feeling very hard right now. But it's okay, because this podcast keeps me going. Life is just lifing. Life just keeps coming at me. But the thing is, I feel like I'm really dealing with life well, regardless of how hard it is, because I trust and believe in myself. I know I have so much good to come and I have so much to be grateful for. And that is even being able to feed myself, or waking up, or having clothes to wear that I actually like, small things like that. So I could complain. I could be in a pit of sadness, but I'm not, because I'm happy to be alive. And I know it sounds like, oh my God, you sound so flipping cliche and so typical. I'm actually quite a happy person, and I'm happy to be alive, because I know what it feels like to not appreciate life. And I know what that does to an individual. So yeah, the best way I can conclude my little check-in is I'm having a hard time, but I'm also doing great, because I'm glad to be alive. But yes, that is the end of today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, super chilled. Didn't want to put too much pressure on myself, because I am having a hard time. But again, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoy blabbering on about dating and the Desi community. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys were able to relate. I'm glad I kept it super short. So if there was anything you thought of that you would love me to talk about or look more into, drop me a DM, like, share, all of that good stuff. But on that note, that would be the end of today's episode. I thank you so much for watching. I thank you so much for listening. Thank you. Dhanyavad. Sat Shri Akal. Bye.